Ralph Tinkham, one of the passengers who had been on the City of Honolulu, wrote a letter to the newspaper of the University of Michigan College of Engineering, from which he had graduated. Quote, replying to your inquiry relative to my experience at the burning at sea of the SS City of Honolulu, I am free to admit that the episode has considerably more serious and interesting features in retrospect than was the case at the time. The City of Honolulu was a splendid ship of 17,000 tons, equipped well above the average of Pacific shipping, for the convenience and comfort of passengers, and providing excellent service. These facts only add to the shock of realization that this fine vessel has been another contribution to Davy Jones' locker.
Hello, and welcome to the Shipwreck Archive.
Thank you. Would you happen to have the story? The first voyage of the City of Honolulu.
Here we are. Enjoy!
The City of Honolulu had begun life as a North German Lloyd oil-burning twin-screw steamship under the name Friedrich der Grosse. The 10,688-ton ship had been built in 1896 by the Vulcan Yard of Stettin, specifically for the North German Lloyd Line, and placed on the route between Bremen and New York. The Friedrich der Grosse had only changed owners when it was seized during World War I. Following the United States' entry into the war, the United States renamed the vessel the Huron after the Great Lake, and put it to work transporting troops to and from France for the duration of the war. After the war, the Huron was one of the ships that was surrendered by the German government permanently to the United States. The Huron was placed under the charge of the United States Shipping Board, refitted, and put on a route that took her from the east coast of the United States to Brazil for the Munson Line. This would last for 2 years, when she was brought to the Pacific coast for the Los Angeles Steamship Company and refitted once again. She was also given a new name, the City of Honolulu, to reflect her new route that would take her from Los Angeles to Hawaii. This time, no expense was spared to ensure that the newly named City of Honolulu would number among the ships referred to as floating palaces. It was estimated that the refit had cost an estimated $160,000. The City of Honolulu made a successful voyage to Honolulu, Hawaii, for her first voyage under her new name and ownership. Here she picked up 72 passengers, 56 of whom were cabin passengers, and a general cargo valued at about $40,000. As the Huron, she had been estimated to be able to hold about 400 passengers, and if she was still even close to that capacity after the refit, it seems as though many of her passenger spaces were empty. She was also carrying a crew of 145 under the command of Captain Lester. The member of the crew that would later receive the most recognition, however, was not the captain. It was instead the chief wireless operator, Walter Bell. Walter Bell and the 2 other wireless operators on board were employees of the Radio Corporation of America who had been assigned to the ship. For 24-year-old Bell, it was a new position. This was the first time that he had ever been employed on board of a ship. He had been in the aviation service during World War I and had at one point worked as an automobile mechanic, but he was newly employed by the RCA. It was an assignment that would prove that he was more than qualified for the position. Mr. Whitsett was most likely the first of the passengers to notice that the smoke that the crew was already aware of. It was a little after 5 in the morning on the 12th of October, but Mr. Whitsett was an early riser. As soon as he smelled the smoke, Mr. Whitsett rushed to the stateroom that his wife and daughter occupied. He encouraged them to get up, get dressed, and then he carried their luggage up to the deck, where they were soon joined by other passengers. Meanwhile, the crew had been fighting the blaze, which had originated in the second-class cabin area towards the stern of the ship, but it continued to grow. The wireless operator on duty was not aware that the ship was on fire until Captain Lester called the wireless room at 5:40 in the morning. He was told to wake up the other wireless operators and report to the bridge. While the other two operators got up, the operator on duty went to the bridge, where he was told about the fire and given the instruction to send out a message for other ships to stand by in case they were needed. By the time he got back to the wireless room, Bell was at the set and immediately sent out the general message to anyone who was within range that the city of Honolulu was on fire, and they would soon be sending their position. The three operators acted as a team, with Bell in charge of sending the messages, and the other two running back and forth to relay information from the wireless room to Captain Lester. Multiple ships proved to be in range: the Enterprise, the City of Los Angeles, the West Farallon, and the U.S. Army transport, the Thomas. None of the ships were very close, but they all confirmed that they had heard the call. No one realized it yet, but the West Farallon was the closest vessel. Though she was heading in the opposite direction from the city of Honolulu, on receiving the call, she turned around. The call was also picked up by Pearl Harbor and the Radio Corporation station in Marshall, California. The Marshall radio station put out an order to all civilian ships that had their operators on board for silence, so that nothing from the city of Honolulu would get lost in the chatter. A similar order was sent out to Navy vessels from the station on Yerba Buena. The city of Honolulu had the undivided attention of every wireless room in the region. Though they asked that ships in the region stand by, the city of Honolulu did not immediately call for assistance or make an SOS. Indeed, at 7:20 in the morning, when the Marshall station asked if the fire was any worse, Bell simply responded that it was about the same. It was not until an hour later that Bell would tap out a frantic SOS. He then called out to the Enterprise, which he believed to be the closest vessel, and asked that they come to their aid. The Enterprise simply responded, "Coming." On the Enterprise, the engine had already been set to full speed, and there was nothing else they could do. Captain Lester at first hoped that he would be able to bring his vessel to San Pedro, which was 670 miles away, and receive help there. If his crew was able to keep the fire somewhat under control, it might be possible even if they could not put it out entirely. The fire gained too rapidly, however, and Captain Lester was soon forced to tell the engines to slow, because their speed was adding wind to the fire and making it even stronger. The crew continued to pour water down onto the fire with the pumps, but they were slowly driven up to the main deck by the heat and smoke. So much water was finally poured into the ship that she developed a sudden list of 35 degrees to starboard, and there was a momentary fear that the ship was going to capsize completely. Fortunately, this did not occur due to the relatively calm seas, but the pumps were stopped, and the engine crew was soon driven from their posts by the smoke and heat. Captain Lester gave the order for the lifeboats to be gotten ready. In the wireless room, Bell responded to the sudden tilt of the ship by bracing his foot against the table, and continued to transmit information to the rescue ships that were heading their way. In the meantime, the lifeboats had begun to get swung out and filled with passengers. The smooth seas again came to their aid, as did how calm and collected the crew and captain appeared to the passengers. As soon as the passengers had learned of the fire, there had been a rush to the deck, and then many of them had rushed again to collect personal items. But when the time came to abandon ship, there was no panicked rush. The passengers could have also saved their time in gathering their belongings, None of them were permitted to bring their baggage with them on the boats, but even this does not seem to have caused much distress. At this point, the ship was an inferno, and the passengers mostly seemed thankful that the crew was seeing to it that they would safely escape the ship. The evacuation was not completely without incident. Because of the list, the port-side boats had to be lowered into the sea and then filled by means of a rope ladder. One passenger fell from a rope ladder when it broke, but was not seriously injured. One of the officers and 3 of the crew members were overcome by smoke, but fortunately one of the passengers was a doctor and he was able to give them medical aid. The doctor was wearing only his pajamas, since he had been forced to make an emergency escape from his room via a porthole. Several members of the crew fell overboard during the evacuation, but they were pulled from the sea by the boats. The 2 wireless operators who had been acting as messengers between Bell and Captain Lester now went to help with the launching of the lifeboats, leaving Bell alone in the wireless room. Bell sent another message to the Enterprise asking if they were coming. The Enterprise confirmed and asked how things were. Bell told them that the lifeboats were being swung out and that the fire was very bad. Radio Magazine would later claim that the drama had silenced almost all chatter along the West Coast as operators sat by their sets, hoping for updates about what was happening on the city of Honolulu. Around 9 a.m., Bell sent another message that they would be leaving the ship any minute now. He was still on the ship at 9:50, however, when he sent another message stating that the only people left on the ship were himself, Captain Lester, the chief officer, and the chief engineer. At this point, reportedly, the flames were getting dangerously close to the wireless room. He still took the time to relay a message from the shore to Captain Lester, and then send the answer. And then he sent the last message from the city of Honolulu, quote, "Leaving ship now, GB." The evacuation of the city of Honolulu was complete, and everyone was now in the lifeboats, but they did not go far from the city of Honolulu. The rescue ships that were expected had been sent their coordinates, and they might not be found if they drifted. They anchored the boats using sea anchors and got ready for a long wait. They had been told not to expect rescue until the next day at the soonest. In the meantime, many of the passengers were experiencing seasickness, and there was only a little food, water, and blankets to be shared around due to the hurried nature of the final exit from the ship. Almost all of the passengers, except for the Whitsets, who had realized that there was a fire early, were poorly dressed. All anyone could do to pass the time was watch the city of Honolulu, which was now a pillar of fire. It was, with great surprise, that the passengers were met with the sight of the West Farallon in the distance at noon. Those on board the West Farallon could not miss the landmark of the burning ship, and headed their way, pulling the people from the boats around 3 in the afternoon. The West Farallon was sent a request by the wireless to try to take the city of Honolulu under tow if possible, so that she could be saved. But the captain and crew of the West Farallon quickly decided that they would never be able to get close enough with the smoke and flames, and they abandoned the idea. Both Captain Lester and the captain of the Farallon firmly expressed their belief that the city of Honolulu was past all saving. The West Farallon had the passengers on board, but she was not equipped for them. She was a cargo vessel, with a full cargo of oil and cedar posts. Though the officers gave up their cabins to the women and children, the ship was simply not supplied for the sudden influx of people. The Army Transport Thomas was expected the next morning, and it was decided to wait near the city of Honolulu for the Thomas to arrive, and transfer the people from the city of Honolulu to her, since she had accommodations for them. the West Farallon still did their best to make their guests comfortable. They were given dinner and many cups of coffee to warm them up, and then beds were set up the best as was possible on the decks of the ship. Passenger Ralph Tinkham admitted that it was not until they lay down for the night that the entire ordeal and the danger that they had been in really came home to roost for him, and he suspected that the same was true for many of the passengers. The Thomas must have hurried, because she arrived during the night, when everyone had expected her at 8 the next morning. The transfer over to the Thomas was a smooth one, and the passengers had nothing but good things to say about the officers and crew of all three ships. The Thomas was full of officers and their families, as well as enlisted men who were returning from Manila. Their destination was San Francisco, but orders came from Washington to route the ship to Los Angeles first to drop off the people from the city of Honolulu. The Thomas was better equipped to make the rescued people comfortable, and when Mrs. Whitsett caught a domesticated bird she suspected had been released by someone from the city of Honolulu, the people on the Thomas even found her an empty bird cage so she could bring it home. The burning of the city of Honolulu on her first voyage under that name, and after an extensive overhaul, caught the public's attention for some time. It was later determined that the problem had been in the wiring in the second-class cabin, but that hardly got any mention at all. Far greater attention was paid, both in the newspapers and the accounts of the survivors, to the role that the wireless had played in getting timely help for the people of the city of Honolulu. Bell was made a hero overnight for remaining at his wireless set until the last minute to ensure that help was on the way. The city of Honolulu was indeed past all salvage, though it was not immediately abandoned. Tugs were dispatched from Los Angeles in the hopes that they would be able to do what the West Farallon had not attempted: get a tow line to the city of Honolulu and bring her in to be salvaged. They confirmed what Captain Lester had already known, that the city of Honolulu had been completely gutted by the flames, and no one could safely get close to her to tow her. The idea was abandoned, and on the 17th of October, the city of Honolulu was sunk, putting an end to the floating palace whose career in the role had only just begun. For more information, please see Radio Magazine from December 1922 or see our other sources in the description below. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for visiting the Shipwreck Archives. See you soon.